once again, we'd like to thank our sponsors, BioLens Lab. BioLens is a custom contact lens lab manufacturing specialty contact lenses from scleral lenses, orthokeratology lenses, for myopia control and soft contact lenses as well. Today, we're going to have 4 speakers, myself included. I'll be introducing what we're going to go through this week and next week as well. Basically, we're going to break down myopia management into different areas. But today, we're going to be introducing the idea of myopia management and why myopia management is important as well. As a way of disclosure, I head the Corneal contact lens and myopia management services at the Lens Ophthalmics Nigeria, and I'm a speaker, and I've received grants from travel grants from BioLens Incorporated. We know that myopia is a condition where the eye, when accommodation is relaxed, we have rays focused in front of the retina. And the International Myopia Institute defines myopia as spherical equivalent refractive error less than minus 0.5 diopters. Low myopia is classified as myopia lower than 6 diopters, high myopia greater than 6 diopters, and pre-myopia hyperopia less than 0.75 plus 0.75, and not up to minus 0.5. We will consider pathologic myopia as an axial length greater than 26 millimeters with posterior segment changes as well. We know that the prevalence of myopia varies across the world depending on the area being looked at, but we know it's more in East Asian countries. In Africa, we also know that in school-age children, a recent meta-analysis put the prevalence of myopia at 4.7%. However, there are projections that by the year 2050, half the world's population will have myopia, and by 2050, studies also indicate that in Africa, school-age children, the prevalence of myopia would shoot up to about 17%. And what's worrisome is that out of the 50% of the world's population, which is estimated to develop myopia by 2050, about 500 million of those will likely develop high myopia, and we know high myopia is associated with certain complications. We know there are certain risk factors associated with myopia, and these include family history, East Asian ethnicity, increased lack of accommodation has also been linked to myopia, near isophoria, low hyperopia before the age of 7, kids who spend more time on digital devices or near work and less time outdoors, conditions that obscure the retina also. But we know recently there have been several other risk factors that have been identified, like sleep pattern, lifestyle habits, and even dietary habits. Now, there are certain myths that we know are associated with myopia, especially in Africa. In this part of the world, myopia is still looked at as an inconvenience, or just something that you just have to wear spectacles for. And we know that there have been some myths, like you hear that delaying correction for myopia may help the child emmetropize. We know that that's false because you're likely just encouraging amblyopia and depriving the child of good vision. We also hear things like wearing eyeglasses will make the eyeball smaller, which is false. We also have heard that undercorrection may be some form of myopia, myopia control, but we know that from published research, it's likely not true, even though we do not have 100% evidence, but a lot of studies done on it have shown that undercorrection may be myopogenic, in fact, and may cause myopia to get worse. We know that as clinicians, there are several tests that we do before we arrive at the diagnosis. But specifically for myopia, we would want clinicians to take proper history to be able to establish the risk profile. For example, screen time use, time outdoors, time spent on near work, parental history of myopia, how long the child has been wearing the spectacles, or correction for how the refractive error has been changing over time. This helps establish a risk profile, which you can use in determining the strength or efficacy of myopia control strategies that you should be using. For refraction, we place more emphasis on cycloplegic refraction when it comes to myopia management because we want to give the full correction. We do not want to undercorrect. It's also important to do keratometry or corneal topography if you have these devices, because you do not want to be managing secondary myopia like keratoconus or corneal ectasias the way you would typically manage a typical myopia management in an axial myopia. Dilated fundus examination is important so you can pick up posterior segment changes. Biometry is extremely important, especially when we look at myopia in terms of progression and estimating risk factors. We now believe that true myopia control is control of axial elongation, and you want that axial length to fall within the normal growth chart for what's expected for that child's age. It's also important, if you have these devices at your disposal, to do OCTs to image the retina and the choroid, as these can change with myopia control interventions. Binocular vision tests are also very important as well in myopia management. There are several complications associated with myopia, and I'm not going to dive into all of these, but we know that myopia can lead to blinding complications, and in the Asian part of the world, myopia is already a significant cause of visual impairment. It's been associated with myopic maculopathy, glaucoma, cataracts, visual impairment, as I mentioned, strabismus, anxiety, depression, and financial burden. But what's not often talked about is how myopia may lead to mental health disorders, not just in the children who suffer these conditions, but also in their parents as well. And a study that was done recently in Africa actually showed that in some individuals with high myopia, especially in females, they had poorer quality of life and mild depression. I already mentioned that myopia can be associated with several pathologies, but Olga will be speaking more on that, so I'll skip that. Myopia control options vary. However, we know that in this part of the world, in Africa, some practitioners still think that using single vision spectacles or single vision contact lenses is a form of myopia management, and we know that this is not the case. We know that whether you're prescribing the full prescription or under correction with single vision contact lenses or spectacles, you're not doing myopia control, you're just improving vision. We also know that there have been several interventions that are at our disposal that we can use for myopia management. These may be bifocal spectacles, progressive addition lenses, special myopia defocus lenses like the HALT technology from Essilor, DIMS from Hoya, and the cylindrical refractive elements from Zeiss. However, there are also contact lens options as well. Multifocal contact lenses, orthokeratology, have also been shown to be efficacious in myopia management. Low-dose atropine as well has also been shown to be efficacious in managing myopia, and these treatments can be combined, for example, contact lens options with atropine. Now, Mark Bullimore actually summarizes why myopia management is important in a very interesting way. And he had written a paper, Why Every Diopter Matters. And this is important because oftentimes as a clinician, I get referrals for myopia when it's usually at the late stage, or it's usually quite high, -15, -18, -20. And I'm talking kids who are less than 10 years of age. Now, the problem with this is by then, the child is already out of the park, and there's not much evidence for myopia control in such high myopia. So the lesser the myopia, the more we're able to keep the myopia at a lower grade, the more options we have available for that individual. Also, the risk of complications is lower with lower magnitude of myopia. And from the studies and meta-analysis that was done, it was shown that if you're able to reduce myopia progression by even 1 diopter, you reduce the chance of developing myopic maculopathy in a kid by about 40%. Now, let's bring it home and see why, and let's talk about why we're doing a webinar like this. In 2022, one of the speakers in this webinar had put some of us involved in research together with the Center for Eye and Public Health Initiative in Africa. Myself, Covin, and some other speakers in this webinar were involved in this study. And what we had found at the time was quite shocking. what we saw was that when we had surveyed eye care practitioners across Africa, about 64.3% still believed that prescribing single vision spectacles were a form of myopia control. Now, this is worrisome considering what the current evidence says. Now, the reason for the hesitancy is quite interesting, and it begs the question, why do we hesitate to manage myopia instead of diving right into myopia management once we've diagnosed the child with myopia? One of the possible issues that may be is because we are not abreast with evidence. We are not abreast with what the literature says about the myopia management strategies. And that's the reason why we're having webinars like this, to educate practitioners, to be able to manage patients better, to educate parents, and drive policy change across Africa in terms of myopia management. Just to give an example, the age-related eye disease study that had looked at using high-dose antioxidants for managing age-related macular degeneration had showed that by prescribing these supplements, you could reduce the progression of macular degeneration in AMD by 25%. But a lot of us are not even aware that these antioxidants we prescribe for macular degeneration, age-related macular degeneration, reduces the chances by only 25%, but we don't hesitate to prescribe them. The ocular hypertension treatment study as well had shown that when you prescribe ocular hypotensive agents, that's anti-glaucoma eye drops, to individuals with ocular hypertension, you could prevent the risk of developing glaucoma by about 50%. Whereas we have myopia control strategies that have higher percentages than what I've listed out now, but yet we're still hesitant to prescribe myopia control strategies. Oftentimes, when you see a patient with glaucoma in clinical practice, you do not wait until the retinal nerve fiber layer has become thinner or the visual field has become poorer before you decide to manage. We would look at the patient's central corneal thickness. We would look at, do gonioscopy, do OCTs of the optic nerve head, do visual fields, and then we decide, okay, looking at the risk factors I've identified and family history of glaucoma, these patients should be placed on a glaucoma management treatment option. And once we place that individual on glaucoma treatment, we monitor them over time. Why is it that when it comes to myopia that's been associated with several diseases, we hesitate? One of the possible reasons is because we probably still think that myopia is just an inconvenience, just something to wear spectacles or contact lenses for. So I'll be handing over to Professor Olga, who would now be talking about why myopia is actually a disease and not just a refractive error. So thank you for listening. So Professor Olga, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and will allow you share yours now. You can unmute your mic, Professor Olga.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Olga Prinat. I'm an optometrist by training, and I'm a global head of medical professional affairs for EssilorLuxottica. I'm also global chair of Global Myopia Awareness Coalition. I try to share my screen.
Yeah, you can go ahead now.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay, I will. I would like also to deep dive a little bit. So fantastic presentation, Obi. I will repeat sometimes few messages, but give give a little bit more details. So.
That's fine.
And so hello everyone again, and greetings from sunny Paris. So I'm based in France, in Paris. So myopia is a disease. So I would like also to recall that this very important report was published in September 2024, the NASEM report, so National Academy of Science, Engineering and Medicine, which recommended myopia to be classified as a disease, and they gave a very important policy. So the report calls for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the US especially, so to classify myopia as a disease and therefore require to medical diagnosis and recommends to actions to take. So myopia, again, I will just repeat again, you all know this statistics, so that by 2050, I'm sorry, half of the world population will be myopic, and about 10% will be high myopic. So, and here you see different geographies, I think, just to recall, and specifically speaking about Africa. So you see from 2020 to 2050, you see from 10% prevalence will be increased to 28. So every geography is touched by this myopia pandemic. So now I would like to also to recall this important study which was done by Zadnik and her colleagues, and the study was published in JAMA Ophthalmology. So we defined the age normal cutoff based on the big sample of population in the US on 4,500 children, very diverse population. So, as you know, young children are expected to be slightly hypermetropic, and lower hypermetropia lower hypermetropia than expected for a given age can already predict a myopia development, so pre-myopia. And you see here that, for example, at age of 6, the cycloplegic refraction less than 0.75 will already indicate a pre-myopia. And for age of 7, 8, cycloplegic refraction less than plus 0.05 also will indicate pre-myopia. And 11, at age of 11, cycloplegic refraction is supposed to be ametropic. So now, if you look at what is happening if myopia occurs at younger age, so it's very well known that the younger a child becomes myopic, the faster the child will develop myopia, which potentially will represent higher risk of higher myopia and ocular complications later life. So if you look at this example here, you see the graphs. So, for example, if myopia occurs at the age of 7 and myopia is about 1 diopter, so without any myopia control solutions, at the age of 16, myopia is likely to be -6. Now, if you take another example, children if myopia starts about -1 again at age of 11, at 16 myopia is likely to be -2. So again, younger is the child, higher will be myopia at later age. And we see here that myopia onset statistically appearing at 7 years old, progression rate is faster, so almost 1 diopter per year, and myopia onset at age of 12, progression rates average is only 0.3 per year. So now, if you would like to explore a little bit more, more about the factors that may cause myopia, there are two big sections here. First is a family story. Ethnicity plays a role. So in East Asia, of course, prevalence is higher, but also parental story, so number of myopic parents. So genetic factors also play important role. And then another segment here is optical and environmental factors, such as optical, nerve work activity, and time spent outdoor. But let's see more in details. I love this table. This table was prepared by Dr. Kate Gifford from Myopia Profile. And when she used to practice myopia management in her store, she built this table in order to communicate to parents and also to be able to take the best possible decision in terms of myopia management. Why this table is very interesting? Because it works like a traffic light codes. So low risk green, and medium risk orange, and high risk red. So this table is based on evidence-based information. So what are the factors contributing to myopia development? First, very important is the current age of child. As we saw previously, younger is the child, higher is the risk. Now, parental myopia. So one myopic parent or two myopic parents. So two myopic parents, risk will be multiplied by 5 to develop myopia. So time spent outdoor. Time spent outdoor does matter. So children, for example, who spend little time outdoor, less than 2 hours per day, will represent higher risk. As an example, also to give you, Singapore is a capital of myopia. Children on average spend less than half an hour per day outdoors. This is also can explain why this, so it's not only one explanation, of course, with high prevalence or in Singapore, but one of those explanations. So time spent on near work is very important, but outside of school hours. So if child spent more than 3 hours per day in addition to outside of school hours, you see it's also represent high risk. And another factor is very important also, the rate of progression per year. So low risk is a progression is less 0.5 diopters, medium risk between 0.5 and 125, and high risk more than 125 diopters. And again, as previously already explained, refractive error under cycloplegic refraction. So high risk is when cycloplegic refraction for age of 6, 7 is less than plus or 75 diopters. So if I give an example of a child which is, for example, having now 6 years old, spending 1 hour per day outdoor and having near vision activities such as gaming more than 3 hours per day, and representing already a cycloplegic refraction minus 0.25, which is a pre-myopia status, because as Obi explained previously, myopia is defined as a refractive status starting from minus 0.5. This child at 6 years old with a cycloplegic refraction minus 0.25 is already pre-myopic and representing very high risk of myopia development. So which means what you can do as a recommendation, increase significantly outdoor time and decrease working hours in outside of school hours, and already maybe you can schedule follow-up visit every 3 months or every 6 months to see. But now in some countries where solutions are already available to prevent myopia with optical solutions or with atropine treatment, we are like in Asia, especially in China, in pre-myopic children, we already do, we prescribe already treatment options to avoid myopia development now. And what we know today as well, it's evidence-based. If you already applied treatment options to pre-myopic children, it's even more effective than treat myopia later to reduce myopia progression. So, and now also, if you look at also differences between different ethnicities. So, for example, if you look at Asian population, rate of myopia progression per year is about 0.9 diopters per year, and if you look at the Caucasian population, annual progression rate is much more less, almost 2 times less, so 0.55 diopters per year. So now, if we speak about optical factors, so it's very well known that peripheral hypermetropic defocus will increase ocular growth, and various imposed myopic defocus can slow down actual elongation. So myopic subject typically have a relative hypermetropia in the periphery, while hypermetropic subjects have relative myopia. So what we also know that undercorrection is a bad thing today, so we never should undercorrect children because this will trigger myopia development, which means as well, once myopia is detected, children should benefit from full prescription of myopia. In terms of near work activities in myopia onset, so again, near work activities associated with myopia onset and increased diopters hours of near work will increase myopia preference significantly. So again, very important here also to indicate that working distances also will play a role in intensive near work. So which means we need to increase working distance, it should be above 20 centimeters. And if there is intense near work, as already explained also previously, we need to encourage children to take breaks. So now, near work outdoor time and myopia onset. So it has been demonstrated that increased outdoor time is effective to prevent myopia onset, but once myopia already is established, there is no conclusive evidence that outdoor work can slow down myopia progression. But if a child is myopic, you would like to prescribe myopia management option to reduce myopia development, we still recommend, of course, to have enough time to spend outdoors, such as at least 2 hours per day. In terms of combination, it's will be important. So now, in terms of risk, so as Obi mentioned previously, so first of all, very important to mention that any level of myopia will increase the risk of development ocular pathologies. So there is no safe level of myopia. So you can see clearly from this table that even low degree of myopia, such as from -0.5 up to -3, you see here, there is a risk of development of myopic macular degeneration, retinal detachment, cataract, post-subscleral cataract, glaucoma, open-angle glaucoma. And as well, of course, this might lead to visual impairment after 6 years old, especially. In higher myopia, and this risk will be multiplied significantly. And one of the pathologies we need to highlight here is myopic macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of visual impairment. And this is the most frequent cause of visual impairment, especially, of course, in Asia, and third most common cause of blindness. And just to give also a few details here, so Obi already mentioned a few data. So again, this is based on publications by Mark Billimore and colleagues. So reducing myopia by 1 diopter has the potential to reduce the risk of myopic maculopathy by 40%. Reducing myopia by 1 diopter has the potential to reduce risk of retinal detachment by 23%. Reducing myopia by 1 diopter has the potential to reduce risk of open-angle glaucoma by 16%, and reducing myopia by 1 diopter has the potential to reduce the risk of visual impairment between 19 and 24%. So yes, each diopter matters. So again, just to recap, myopia correction versus myopia management. Of course, myopia correction does matter. But to correct so it also very important to understand differences between myopia correction and myopia management. So first, again, to deep dive into undercorrection, so which will lead to more rapid progression. This is evidence-based. It has been demonstrated that undercorrection of about -25 compared to the full correction will worsen myopia progression. So it's really something you really need to avoid, which means one myopia is detected, full correction is very important. So myopia correction will provide sharp vision, good central vision, but will never delay myopia development. And it will also generate hypermetropic defocus on periphery of the retina, which also might trigger myopia. This is why we need to combine myopia correction with myopia intervention to slow down myopia reduction. So we really need to combine both. And myopia management aims to delay development of myopia to slow down development of myopia progression in order to avoid risk of potential pathology in later life. Again, it will provide good central vision and slow down myopia progression. And there are multiple options to do it. And of course, treatment options can be modified over time. So there are 3 different categories, as was mentioned also previously: spectacle lenses, so progressive lenses, bifocal lenses. So progressive lenses, we have a moderate efficacy, bifocals higher efficacy, up to 50%, for example. So there are also peripheral defocus lenses. They have a not really good efficacy, and latest generation of spectacle lenses, such as DIMS, HAL, and dot lenses. So contact lenses, multifocal contact lenses, extended depth of focus contact lenses, dual focal lenses, and of course, orthokeratology and pharmaceutical options such as atropine. And each solution, of course, has advantages and disadvantages. So probably spectacle lenses are the most easiest to prescribe and dispense, and they have a little inconvenience. So some aesthetic issues can be perceived in case of bifocals, for example. Again, and now just to recap in terms of efficacy, again here coming from peripheral defocus lenses, progressive lenses, bifocal lenses, and the most recent myopia control solution in spectacle lenses. So you see here from inefficient solutions, the efficacy can go up to 67%. Multifocal contact lenses, depending on the type of multifocal contact lenses, efficacy can go from 18 to 67. Orthokeratology, of course, spherical equivalent refraction is not measurable, and low-dose atropine efficacy for spherical equivalent refraction ranges from 15 to 75. So in terms of axial length, which is the key parameter to evaluate efficacy of myopia control solution, because progressive myopia is due to axial elongation. You see again spectacle lenses depending on the solution, they are inefficient also solutions, and the most recent are the most efficient. So efficacy goes up to 60% for axial lens. Multifocal contact lenses efficacy ranges from 22 to 53, orthokeratology between 32 up to 59. And again, it depends on the geometry of the keratology lenses. In low-dose atropine, you see low-dose atropine act more and better on spherical equivalent refraction and less efficient on axial lens. So sometimes depending on the study and dosage which was used, so you see maximum efficacy is about 29%. So all this is documented based on publications. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Professor Olga. Always remember, if you have any questions, if you have contributions, feel free to leave them in the chat section. And at the end of the webinar series, we will be taking your questions and contributions. Now, I'll hand over to Professor Colvin, who will be talking next. I'll make you host, Colvin. You can unmute your mic.
Sure, thanks. I'm using the sound on my mobile phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, and I'm using the video on my mobile phone, but I'm using the presentation from my laptop. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And it says allowing me. Oh, let me apologize. I'm in the lobby of a hotel. I hope you're not hearing too much noise. So let me try and share again. It says the host isn't allowing sharing.
Oh, I think I made you host on your phone. Can you unmute your mic on the laptop so it pops up on my screen and I can make you host there?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute. I'll just reclaim host. Okay, now I've seen that, and you should be able to share your screen now.
Let me share. Yes.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. So you'd have to mute your laptop so we can hear you from the phone.
Yeah, I've done that now.
All right, then.
Okay, so can you hear me from the phone now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, apologies for the technical stuff. My camera is not working, so, and my volume's not great. Okay, so I'm going to speak to you today about myopia management in Africa. Some of the issues have been covered, so forgive me, I'll go through them quickly, but mine is more for a call to action. I'm employed by One Sight Essilor-Luxottica Foundation, which is the foundation of Essilor-Luxottica. So we've heard a lot about the myopia epidemic today. But before we talk about the epidemic, let's talk about why, from a public health perspective, this is very critical. Until 2008, the World Health Organization did not contextualize refractive error as part of blindness and vision impairment. We had numerous meetings, Professor Olden and myself, with them and Professor Nagrao, and eventually convinced them to include it. And when they included it in the calculation, the results were shocking. Refractive error contributes 52.9% of global moderate and severe vision impairment and 20.9% of global blindness. And suddenly, refractive error became one of the most important public health issues in general and became extremely important in eye care. And as we know, majority of that is actually myopia, and we've been told that people have spoken about the fact that by 2050, half of the world's population will be myopic. And in fact, I must say that when our statisticians brought this data to me, the raw data to me, before we published this paper, I really thought they were smoking something because it sounded ridiculous that the figures were so bad. And then subsequently, various experts have agreed with us, and you've heard the input when we look at across the world, it increases. Africa will be around 28% by 2050. So we have a steep growth as well. When we look at different regions in Africa, Central Africa will be around 27.9%, East Africa at 22.7%, North Africa and Middle East is mirroring much of the developed world where it will be close to 53%. When we look at Southern Africa, we're talking about 30.2%, and West Africa will be 26.8%. Not as high as the rest of the world, but don't get excited, because the truth is that we are starting on a low base in terms of resources and our capacity as a continent to respond to this challenge. Various papers have been published that have been used in the analysis that have been made, the systematic reviews around myopia in Africa. But the reality is, when you look at the date of the papers, there's an alarming trend that's developing. And that trend is that much of the papers are old, because many NGOs and others who were supporting the research prevalence studies in Africa have pulled out. And secondly, there's a mixture of cyclopedic and non-cyclopedic papers, and that places a big burden on the way that we analyze and interpret the data as well. So it's good that we have all these papers, but we need more studies, and we've slowed down dramatically. We've heard that by 2050, 1 billion people will have eye myopia, and we've been told about what the implications of that is. And I'm going to come back to this issue. Suffice to say that the WHO, when myself and Prof. Brian Alden approached them and asked them to host a myopia meeting, initially they were not so keen about it. It was thought to be more clinical, etc. But when these numbers were presenting, the WHO then came up with we held a meeting in Sydney, Australia, and they came up with the numbers, came up with the document that placed myopia front and central in the strategy of the World Health Organization. And if we don't react to that as optometrists, we'd be very foolish, because once the WHO contextualized the problem as a problem of importance for the globe, it becomes a strong advocacy tool for us to convince governments and others to respond. The WHO pulled together a group of us, both from industry, foundations, non-profit organizations, academia, and others together, and a toolkit on how to prevent myopia came out. This is a great tool because it is a document that governments will use, and that could be sanctioned by governments because they are very careful not to use WHO material. But many of us do not take these toolkits to government. We do not push them to adopt aspects that came up, and the myopia document should become a document that many of us can use at a national level to push for health promotion activities in terms of myopia. The myopia boom pushed the WHO to launch the WHO SPECS 2030 program. This has become one of the most highest profile programs of the World Health Organization right now. And it is a program that optometrists in particular are the leaders of. We are the leaders of refractive errors across the globe. But what it says is it followed a resolution from the World Health Assembly, which called for a 40% increase in the coverage of refractive errors by 2030. So that's a big challenge, and myopia is a critical part of it. The reality is that we can address the needs of those who have a problem. But if we don't take the lessons that the previous speakers have been imparting around clinical interventions, etc., the progression of myopia will always keep the 40% increase elusive for most of the world. So we know that 80% of what children learn is through vision. We've learned about the impact of eye myopia. The problem is we have a cataract crisis in Africa. Our cataract surgical rate has gone backwards. Africans are most exposed, most at risk of glaucoma, and we haven't even been able to start addressing that. We know that retinal detachment and myopia macular degeneration, in retinal detachment particularly, is going to need surgical intervention. We have a shortage of ophthalmologists. We don't even have the facility at time to conduct retinal surgery in many of our countries. Myopic macular degeneration is also a big challenge for the same similar type of reason. So we got to accept that we as a continent have a crisis. And others have spoken about the study that we did on which showed that 64% prescribed single vision lens. But the Optum stock, their main concerns in that study came out was concerns of cost and safety, limited access, limited information about myopia control options. And this initiative and others are critical to drive this agenda to make sure that we make an impact. Myopia has a massive impact on people and communities. It's great that Olga spoke about myopia as a disease, that it has a big impact. If we talk about it, people appreciate the impact more than it being something like the WHO first told us in our initial meeting around refractive errors. It's not a problem. You can get a glasses easily, a pair of spectacles easily anyway. But today, everybody understands it. Myopia is a disease. It's something that has to be taken much more seriously. It affects quality of life, compromises the road safety, and it impacts on socioeconomic growth. So we need to be able to contextualize myopia in this way to be able to convince our governments and others to invest in it. We did a study where we showed that the world economy loses $244 billion per annum because of myopia in lost productivity. So we need to extrapolate the studies for Africa. We need to use this as a motivation to talk to our governments and say myopia control or myopia management is a good investment. And the numbers speak to that. It's the Minister of Finances that we need to reach around this message because this is a good message. And we need to do more economic impact studies. So specific considerations for our continent is the level of training is a problem, lack of human resources, prescribing practices, which we spoke about, lack of supply chain for specs and contact lenses for myopia management, affordability of services for patients is a big issue, the affordability of products, and there's a big skill deficit in training institutions amongst educators to actually teach myopia management and support current and new practice. And one of the biggest issues we have is the restricted scope of practice laws, especially around cyclopedia. When we look at the number of optometrists, we have 12,175 according to a study that we did, when we need 102,016 optometrists. So we've got a huge challenge on the continent. Affordable correction, that is becoming more available generally, but not in terms of myopia control. And it's a challenge we need to address. We need to look at subsidization by medical insurance. We need to look at subsidization by governments. And as we advocate for services, we need to look at education of practitioners has to become critical. We need to expand events like this. We need to have certification in myopia management. If not, I think our continent's going to get left behind. We need advancement in research and products. And in that respect, we can contribute to what goes out there. We have limited capacity at our universities, I understand, but we've got a young generation of optometrists that are emerging now that are doing some great work, and we need to support them. Cyclopedia is non-negotiable. We should be fighting for this. We should be marching for this. We should be saying to governments that you are compromising the health of our children by not allowing cyclopedia, and we shouldn't allow professional jealousy stand in our way. This is a struggle for our children that we have to engage in, and we need to effect the policy change that's needed. There's so much technology available now that's increasing access. Most of the early technologies that promised adjustable spectacles, etc., have failed. We need to look at how AI and other technologies that's become available that can support us to expand services. We, as one site, Esolo-Laxatia Foundation, are using telerefraction under the control of optometrists in Kenya to expand services to rural areas without the optometrists being physically there. We have to be innovative. If not, we're not going to get control of this. But the big issue is we have to partner or we will perish. And partnership means, for example, the Global Ophthalmic Institute, which a few of us formed, is looking at training educators, getting volunteer optometrists from the other countries, like especially the developed world, to share their skills, etc. So I advise you, those of you who have the skills, to use this platform to help people in other parts of the continent. We need to do high-profile campaigns and have a rallying advocacy platform. In this respect, we launched the One School at a Time. It was launched with Berkeley Vision and an initiative of a few of us who felt that our children's vision, which was a great campaign, was not being taken forward and we need to do something. And through this now, we are reaching schools in Africa, India, and other geographies. But why we say one school at a time? Remember, in Africa, we say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's a similar concept. If each one of us supports one school, so with the KwaZulu-Natal government, for example, we designed the program. But in implementation, it's open for different practitioners, NGOs, etc., to adopt a few schools. Funders are more open to supporting such initiatives. So we as a profession should do this, but make sure that myopia management is integrated, myopia awareness, time outdoors, all of those issues should be part of your awareness campaign. And more recently, we've launched the Global Optometry Public Health Alliance, where we are bringing together optometrists across the world who have an interest in seeing myopia, firstly, not just myopia, but myopia as well, as a public health challenge, developing public health strategies, engaging in advocacy, and pushing policy change that ensures that optometrists can do more and serve more. And that is really, really critical. And I encourage you to understand that all these partnerships can bring the critical mass that we need. If not, a lot of these things, if we want import duties on myopia management products to be dropped, it will lower the prices. We need to go and advocate for that. It's not going to happen automatically. So I'm out of time. So I just want to thank you very much. And if anybody wants to be in contact, that's my LinkedIn and my email address. And I'm happy to respond and also respond today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Colvin. That was very wonderful. So I see some questions and comments in the chat section. Keep them coming. At the end of the webinar today, we will take those questions and contributions. So I'm just going to reclaim host now. Colvin, thank you so much. So our next speaker is Professor Adio, who is a pediatric ophthalmologist at the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital. She'll be speaking on the need for co-management in terms of myopia management. And again, it takes a village to manage myopia because sometimes you will need to cross-refer. And she's going to be talking about that and the roles of each cadre of eye care practitioners in terms of myopia management. Professor Adio.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Can you see my slides? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see your slides and we can hear you.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to, screen sharing has stopped.
Just check, you're still host. You should be able to share your screen. We can see your screen, Professor Adio.
Okay, you can?
Yes, we can see your screen. But we can't see your slides anymore. Now
Can
we
you see it now?
see slides. Yes, we can.
Yes. Great, great. All right, so my name is Adedayo Adio. I work at the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, and I'm also on the Scientific and Ethics Bureau of the World Society of Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus. And I'm also the director of the Rehabilitation Center for the Blind in Rivers State. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. We'll be talking about the need for co-management of pediatric myopia, when to refer, and who to refer to. That's my place of work. I don't have any financial disclosures. Okay, so myopia is a pervasive global public health concern. As we have seen, the last few speakers have stressed that a lot, particularly among the younger population. This has increased in prevalence around the world, with about a third of population of kids having myopia. And this really happened to a greater degree during COVID crisis, and with a lot of people spending a lot of time indoors. Many children between the ages of 8 and 10 years have been found to spend even up to 6 hours per day looking at digital devices. All right, so we've talked about the types, but I'll just stress that the axial elongation is the most common cause. And of course, this is the type that is usually progressive and causes the most trouble in these patients. In terms of risk factors, we have talked about that also, but any increase in all types of close or near work usually leads to myopia, with, of course, less time spent in sunlight also have been found. That is why they talk about playtime. Increased supervised playtime is very important for children so that they don't develop myopia or it doesn't get as bad as it should, as it could. So now, why is myopia a concern? It's not life-threatening, but it can lead to blindness. In the rehab center where I moonlight, about 5% of those who are blind in that place is from myopia. And once myopia starts, myopia quickly progresses, and of course, really there's no cure for it. So early intervention is very important. This helps to slow down this process. We have talked about the complications. Some of them have shown here, with the most worrisome being myopic macular degeneration, with predisposing factors with lacar cracks and posterior staphyloma from high myopia. I'll just keep this particular and lead to difficulty for school performance. Difficulties will begin to show. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. Social interactions also are very hard. It makes it hard to participate in sports, which leads to low self-esteem. It makes it very limited. In fact, in some parts of the world, if you are short-sighted, like India and all that, they go to any extent to make sure that it doesn't show up, so that you don't have any problems with selecting partners or career choices also. And also, overall quality of life is also affected with eye strains, headaches, and of course, impaired safety when playing and participating in sports. So the management strategies have been listed, and we know the importance of regular eye exams. We need to monitor the progression and of course to check that complications are detected early. So what are the early intervention steps to take? Increased time spent outdoors with more access to green spaces, which are places that have maybe gardens, parks, and all that, and reduce time on smartphones. When I'm dealing with parents, I usually make sure that they open their on their devices and check the screen time for their particular child, so that they are also involved in the management of this condition. Of course, optical treatments are there, and pharmacological treatment is also there, which is very important for us to take note of. So full correction, I've been said, has been stressed, so it's very important to give full corrections and pharmacological treatment if it is indicated. And what do we need to look out for when somebody has myopia? We look for vision changes, the progression of the myopia, and we watch out for complications before they develop. Once you see that a patient could have any of these, we make sure that you refer them. And of course, rapid progression of more than one diopter, we don't want to wait until 1 year anyway. So I usually make sure we check. So about 0.5 diopters every 6 months should be looked for, and then you refer. And high myopia, once it's exceeds 6 diopters, you make sure the retina surgeon has a look so that any risk of complications are all checked. Taken care of. If there is a family, of course, you need to know that these patients are important to refer. So it's very important to intervene early because progression is better controlled. And of course, it helps to preserve vision. So co-managing the patients is extremely important. As professionals, eye care professionals, the parents also, other healthcare providers like the pediatricians. It's important for everyone to be involved in the care of these patients because these children deserve accessible quality eye care so that their future eye health is protected. The strategies have been mentioned, multidisciplinary approach, and we're going to be talking about that very shortly. We've talked about regular monitoring, treatment options. We're supposed to work together, optometrists and ophthalmologists, with authorities also handling routine management while the ophthalmologist handles the more complex cases. Now, in terms of the ophthalmologists in the management of myopia, they are to detect, make diagnosis early and treat, and then you're expected to give full prescription, monitor the progression, and the younger the child, the more frequent the monitoring. And of course, you educate the parents and the children themselves. You can collaborate with other professionals and recommend myopia control treatment. It's important to be aware of the low dose atropine, which is given once a day, and this helps to stop the lengthening of the eyeball. Other areas of managing these patients is surgical intervention if they develop cataracts or refractive surgery when they're old enough, up to 18 years. And they're managing complex cases, those with retinal detachment or other coexisting comorbidity, and also offering advanced diagnostics to assess and manage any related complications. Now, the optometrists, what is their role in the management, the co-management of these patients? They are to offer primary eye care, giving routine eye exams, correcting vision, and managing the patient in line with best practices. Myopia control is also there to make sure that you're aware of every aspect of it, which will be talked about very extensively within this next few days. Monitoring is also there to help to monitor, adjust treatment plans, and provide ongoing care. And most importantly, education of the patients, the parents about the risk, the treatment options, lifestyle changes, the type of lighting, even posture, and then of course, referral to ophthalmologists for surgical interventions and related. Now, orthoptists are not ruled out in the management of these patients. These are vision therapists. They help to patients with eye alignment problems and coordination issues that are associated with myopia, and look at the vision and look at the progression also. They also help to do vision therapy because some of them have these issues, using filters, prisms, computer games, flip cards, so that the eyes and the brain work together. Usually they don't prescribe treatment independently, but support efforts of all the other professionals in terms of myopia control. They collaborate with the ophthalmologists and the optometrists. And of course, they're also involved in patient education so that they are involved in the treatment. Now, pediatricians, how can they help? They are also involved in co-managing these patients, as they are the ones that usually see these patients first. Vision screening, first exam should be by the age of 6 months after discharge from the hospital at birth, and then at the age of 2 or 3 before they start going to school. They are to refer to eye specialists once they discover there's any issues. Then they are involved maximally in education and awareness, particularly parental education, talking about the risk of myopia, looking out for the symptoms, telling them the symptoms and all the treatment options. Then they should also stress the importance of outdoor activities. It has been proven to slow the progression of myopia. In addition, there is also collaborative care with eye care specialists, and they are expected to also track overall health with some health factors that have been noted to impact myopia development and progression. Other roles they could play is prevention. We all know that prevention is very important, much better than cure, especially in developing countries. They are to promote healthy habits. We have the 20-20-20 rule. They're to promote it very well because these children, once they are able to understand this rule, they are less likely to progress in myopia or even develop it. What outdoor activities? Sunlight is very important. Playing outside in the sun under supervision outside, taking part in sports, this has been known to reduce the risk. Then other areas of collaboration is the role of educators, the teachers. They are to promote outdoor activities during break time and when they are doing sports. They are to monitor screen time. There are some countries that talk about use devices most of the time, digital devices, and they are all reverting back to using books now. So they're to monitor screen time in classrooms and promote breaks in reading, regular breaks. They're to talk about proper lighting and make sure that the children have the sitting arrangements that will promote reduced eye strain. Then they are to educate on eye health, and it should form part of the curriculum in the schools also. Then they should inform parents on any visual challenges noticed, because surprisingly, some parents don't notice when their children have such problems. It's a teacher that will be telling the parents, oh, I don't think your child can see very well, so you need to take steps to take care of this patient. And of course, they are to support eye care. Once the child has been given glasses, they are to encourage the use and ensure that they attend their eye checkups regularly. And of course, they are expected to create a visually friendly environment to reduce visual stress. Now, the parents are not left out in the co-management of myopia. They are expected to encourage lifestyle changes in their children and healthy habits by ensuring near work is balanced. Outdoor activities are stressed. Most parents keep their children indoors watching television all day. These are things that need to be discouraged. And then they are to be told all that. Then they should balance screen time, follow the 20-20 rule, monitor and limit screen time to the number of hours or minutes that is prescribed for that particular age. In addition, I would like to also stress that children, infants, should not even be allowed to look at screen, except maybe grandma or somebody is using screen digital device to say hello from somewhere that is distant from them. They're not expected to do that because they are promoting myopia in these patients. Now, also, parents are expected to support treatment plans so that when their children are given glasses, they are to wear it, contact lenses, they are to use them. Then to promote eye health, that's encourage balanced diet rich in vegetables and fruits, omega-3 fatty acids, which support eye health, and include proper lighting in the management of these patients when they are reading or doing their homework. Of course, the children won't take themselves to the hospital for checkup. They are to bring them for regular eye exams, and of course, to track vision changes by observing if they are squinting or having difficulty seeing distant objects, and communicate same with the eye care professionals. So in conclusion, a multidisciplinary team approach ensures that patients with myopia receive the most comprehensive and effective care possible. So everyone should collaborate to tailor treatment plans and provide ongoing monitoring and support. Remember, the higher the myopia, the higher the risk of losing vision. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Adio. That was very interesting. We've basically talked about introduction to myopia management today. We've talked about myopia as a disease. We've also looked at what we can do as Africans in terms of policy change, in terms of involving parents, co-management, and that gives us a nice kickstart to what we're going to be doing for the rest of the week. So we'll dive right into the question and answer section. I'd read out some of the questions. Professor Corbin has already started answering one of the questions, so thank you very much for that. So the first question is, what's your take on horizontal defocus design by Nova on controlling/stabilizing myopia? In as much as we're not like putting one product over the other, I'll take this question. So we're not putting one product over the other, but I'm aware of some studies that have looked at the use of perifocal lenses, which is what the Nova MyoSafe lens is about. I'm aware of studies that have looked at that for myopia control and has shown good efficacy as well. There are not too many studies that have looked at it. The lens is certainly not available in Africa, but yes, we do know that it can give some form of myopia control. So thank you for that question. The second question is, how do you take care of pre-myopes? Do we need to prescribe corrective spectacles or just lifestyle modifications? I'll give this question to Professor Olga. Yeah.
Okay,
All
with
right.
pleasure, Obi. So pre-myopia, I think the most important is at the beginning is to have a prevention intervention, such as increasing outdoor time. To recommend to have a more breaks. So 2020 rule works also very well. So decrease near work activities. So screen time, I don't like to say screen time. It's a screen time. It became like a new normal. Screen time replaced hard copies, books a little bit. So basically near work activities to decrease. So increase outdoor time and decrease as much as possible near work activity outside of school hours. Now, pre-myopia, it means children is not myopic. It's still low level of hypermetropia. So there is no prescription needed. But now, for example, in Asia, ophthalmologists in some cases can prescribe atropine, for example. If you have two myopic parents, for example, and there is a high risk of developing myopia, there is a strong history story. Or, for example, we have Stellis lenses, and we have evidence-based two studies have been published recently. Indicated that plano Stellis lenses for low hypermetropic reserve or pre-myopic children significantly decrease actual lens elongation, but provided that children has been identified as a pre-myopic children. Okay. So, but the first line care is increased outdoor time and decreased near work. And of course, when over interventions, there is evidence-based, so they can be applied as well. And then follow-up visits are very important. So if you saw the chart, how to identify child at low, medium, or high risk. So in case of high risk, some practitioners would like to see children every 3 months, but recommended follow-up visits are every 6 months.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Olga. I think that's a very good answer. So basically, lifestyle modifications, decrease near work, and some myopia control interventions have been shown, like low-dose atropine and defocus lenses, like Stellis lenses.
Yeah, low-dose atropine 0.005.
Yes, 0.05%.
So yeah, 0.001 was not efficacious for pre-myopia. Yes, only 0.05. Yes.
Yes. And also, I'd like to use this opportunity to correct something. So I had mentioned about the DIMS lens before. The efficacy for that is about 50%, not 70%. I think there is one more question. Next question is, how often is it expected to monitor myopia reduction using myopia control methods? Typically in clinical practice, in my practice, we review the kids every 6 months. But if we have a fast progressor, we might see you much quicker. And if there are certain complications and we're co-managing maybe with a retinal specialist or a glaucoma specialist, the schedule might differ. You might want to see maybe a glaucoma patient more frequently to ensure they're using their medications, pressures are under control, and you could review for myopia at different schedules. So is there any other speaker who has any other thing to add? Professor Adio, how often would you recommend a myopia patient is reviewed for one of myopia control?
Well, pretty much the same, but at first visit, at first diagnosis, I ensure that a retina specialist sees so that we are sure there is no incubating complication. All the signs that would point to a possible complication later must be checked out and noted down. And if the patient is younger, I like to see them every 3 months. But if the patient is around from 7 to 10, then I see them every 6 months.
All right, then. Thank you very much.
Obi, can I just make a point here?
Go ahead, Professor Kovin.
I understand the strategy of referring the patients in the initial visit to the ophthalmologist in many settings. But I do think that long term, if we want to provide good management, we have to upskill our optometrists to do the initial review of the retina. Binocular indirect ophthalmoscopy should become standard. And even in countries like South Africa and Nigeria, where we have the laws and the ability to do it, we're finding that a lot of optometrists are not doing it. So I can't stress again that this is a problem that is a tsunami. You cannot expect us not to do all these things and still make a dent on reaching the number of children that need to be reached.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that's important because in terms of screening kids and looking out for complications, your direct ophthalmoscopy would just not cut it. So we all need to brush up those skills. We have a stereoscopic view of the fundus, especially the periphery, where some of these changes can begin to occur. And I think once you've been able to identify these pathologies, and again, it'd be out of your scope once it involves surgical management, it'd be then to make an educated referral, because then you'll be making an appropriate referral and not overburdening a retinal specialist with something that may not be relevant at the end of the day. So that's why, I mean, it's important to do what you're supposed to do within your scope properly, and also make sure that you're making timely and appropriate referrals. Thank you very much, Professor Coven, for that. The next question looks at also Professor Coven has already answered that question in the chat section, so I'll skip that.
No, I haven't answered the follow-up to that question. I asked for clarity. Yeah, I think that the question from Thabo is around mobile clinics to schools. Mm-hmm. I think in the South African context, the mobile clinics has become contentious in the situations where the mobile clinics are going and practicing alongside where existing practitioners are. However, I do think that we need to engage the Out Professional Council to ensure that when it comes to school children, we should be encouraging it. Because if practitioners in the major towns are not reaching the kids, especially those who are disadvantaged, we cannot say that that's our constituency if you are not doing anything for them. And I do think, Thabo, that this is a critical matter that should be taken up at the SAOA, etc., so that there's an exception to some of the objections that may be raised about itinerant practices, etc., historically. Because if we don't get to the schools, the reality is that most of our children in South Africa who need the services are not getting the services. And it would really be us abrogating our ethical responsibilities by not reaching them.
All right, then. Again, I'm not familiar with the way it works in South Africa, so I think, Coven, you have the final say on that one. So the next question looks at using low-dose atropine for myopia management. How long do we use atropine in myopia management? And I'm also going to extend this question to how long do you use atropine? How do you taper atropine? Because we know studies have also shown that when you stop abruptly, you might have a rebound progression. So I'd start off with Professor Adio. You want to talk about this? Professor Adio, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Low-dose atropine, once you make a diagnosis, because children come in at different times, give to them. Usually expected to give until they are 15. Some people give for 1 to 2 years. But usually there's a rebound. What works best generally is 0.01%. That doesn't give us much side effects. There are commercial preparations, but you can also make it yourself. And this particular eye drop should be used once a day. Sometimes in some patients, they could have blur, but usually with 0.01 doesn't do that. For some people, they talk about 0.05% as what to use, and it works better for them. But we find that there is more evidence that it gives more side effects. So generally speaking, up to the age of 15. And when you are tapering, talking about tapering, you should taper watching once once you are following up the progression and it doesn't move for up to a year or 18 months, then you can start tapering off. It doesn't worsen, that's what I mean. Then you can start tapering off.
Okay. So I'll just say this in addition to what Professor Adio has said. In as much as there are a lot of papers that have looked at the 0.01%, which does initially give myopia control, I think the ATOM2 study did show that when they had a head-to-head comparison between 0.01 and 0.05, the 0.05% had better efficacy. But as Professor Adi rightly said, there were slightly higher side effects, like near blur and allergic conjunctivitis in these patients. And what the recommendation is at the end of the day, or became at the end of the day, is to give it in combination with a bifocal or a progressive addition lens with the transition photochromic coating on the lens to ensure that we're taking care of the glare that it could cause and the potential for near blur vision. But it's also important to keep in mind that some of these kids come down with itchy eyes and sometimes redness of the eyes when you're using 0.05%. As Professor Adi also said, yeah, between about 1 to 2 years, but most of the clinical trials for myopia control usually do it for a 3-year period. So most people would use for between 2 to 3 years and begin to taper rather than suddenly stop the atropine to reduce the rebound effect. Some of the recommendations from clinical guidelines from the International Myopia Institute would usually say you should give it in combination with an optical strategy so that by the time you're tapering, there is less chances of having a rebound effect compared to not doing at all. Professor Olga, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't have a intensive experience with atropine. I can comment more on spectacle lenses if there are examples. Yes.
That's okay.
Obi, can I make a point here on this one as well?
Go ahead, please, Colin.
One of the concerns, and when we did the refractive error studies in children in Africa, when we did the African component of the study, we found that the guidelines for cyclopedia that were recommended for children in general globally did not work in the African context because of the increased pigmentation in the irises. I think it's going to become important for us to test some of these recommendations in an African context to see if our children respond the same way to these. Because one of the problems we have is most of the data that we all are presenting is driven by the reality of the rest of the world, particularly Asia and the US, etc. So I just want to flag that as something to consider. I don't have the answer to it as to whether it's a critical issue or not, but I think that before we slavishly follow all of these things, our academics and our intellectuals need to interrogate this from an African perspective. We are not here to just duplicate things that in the long term, I think it'll all work to some extent. But the question is, are we getting the maximum benefit as Africans out of this therapies because we're following international guidelines?
Awesome. That's a very important point, Colin. I am aware of a colleague of ours who's currently doing that for his PhD, looking at different iris pigmentation in multiple ethnicities and the response to atropine. So, I mean, it'd be good to see that study being replicated in Africa because it's not being done in Africa at the moment, but it's important to have that done here because just the same way we have ethnic variation in a lot of things that we measure clinically, the response to atropine might also vary based on ethnicity. So thank you very much. I've taken that point down. So that might be something we could look at on a broader level and look up in terms of research. Okay, so the next question will be, Does this management also apply to astigmatic myopic patients? So basically, this individual is asking the myopia control strategies that we've mentioned. Does this also apply to individuals who have myopia and astigmatism? Professor Olga, I think this is right down your alley.
Yeah, I think the most important parameter is actual lens elongation. So this is why biometry is very important. Of course, keratometry is important. We might have a progressive myopia with astigmatism, but the most important parameter when myopia will be increasing is because you have a pathology like a keratoconus. So if we don't evaluate properly keratometry, biometry, and actual lens, sometimes, so diagnosis should be posed appropriately. So if we detect progressive myopia, which means elongation of eye, so it will be increased. So when we say it's a progressive myopia, so I think diagnosis is a key.
Yeah. And two things I'd like to add to that is most of the myopia control strategies in terms of spectacles and even multifocal contact lenses, and to an extent orthokeratology, does take account some form of astigmatism as well. So
yeah, but in spectacle lenses, if we speak about Stellis, which this solution is not available yet in your country, but we have astigmatism up to 4 diopters. Okay,
yes.
So, but what I'm saying here, sometimes we might say there is only myopic astigmatism, but we need to really understand, is it a progressive myopia with astigmatism or not? So just because sometimes it can be only purely astigmatism, which is not going to be evolved over time, or can evolve over time, such as keratoconus problems.
Yeah. So I think the last point you just made is extremely important, because I didn't attend AVO this year, but I kept in touch with some of the papers that were presented. And one interesting paper had looked at astigmatism in myopes, progressive myopes, if the cylindrical component was changing or it was just the axial length and the spherical component. And it did show that for most progressive myopes, it be the axial length changing or the spherical component, not the cylindrical part. So if the cylindrical part was changing, we probably should be looking to screen for keratoconus and performing corneal topography. So I think that's very important. Thanks for that, Professor Olga.
Of course. And also maybe there are also studies very interesting. We didn't speak about dry eye. There is an interesting study which was published a few years ago saying also that almost 50% of myopes, we have a dry eye as well.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. Also, to the point you just made, and we'll also be talking about dry eye disease. On the same day, we'll be talking about contact lens options for myopia control. So thank you very much, Professor Olga. So the next question says, do you foresee digital tools or apps playing a role in at-home myopia monitoring or behavior change? I mean, this is really interesting. I'll kick off with Professor Covin. You want to talk about this?
I do believe that technology is going to offer many opportunities. I like the question because it talks about home monitoring, etc. And I think that when I was with Brian Olden, we were doing some projects with people in China who were actually using technology integrated into spectacles to monitor how much time a child has work at NIA, how much time, what distances they're working, etc. And there's been some developments in that. I must admit, I've lost touch with how far that is gone at the moment. But the truth is that technology is pointing in that direction. And since that time to now, we've had an explosion in technology in our world, and there's all these developments that I think we have to look at how we can integrate them, because prevention is a very critical part of what we do, So whether it's parents monitoring the time the children are spending outdoors or what distance they're working, all of those tools are going to be necessary. The second issue is that I do think that in terms of the way we manage data and the way we learn about myopia is going to change because of technology. It's costly to do studies, for example, but now by pooling data, using big data and the kind of technologies available to analyze the data, we'll start getting some interesting trends, particularly in a continent like Africa where resources for research is lacking. So, and this is an area I think a lot of our optoms on the continent can actually get involved, come up with ideas, and I encourage you to exploit this to the fullest.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Provin, for that. And just to add to that, I mean, there's so much going on in the AI space where we can incorporate this into learning certain things. I'm aware the Meta Lab has a collaboration with the academy where they're looking at the visual experience in terms of environmental factors to study what environmental changes, both indoors and outdoors, might affect myopia onset and progression. So I think this is a space that will keep evolving, and it'd be interesting to see how this evolves and how we can all be part of that evolution. Professor Olga, do you have anything to say on this?
No, so no.
All right, then. That's okay. So the next question, I'll be quick. I mean, we can't take every question, so this will likely be the last one, but you can shoot us an email and we'll be happy to answer questions regarding this. How can we introduce myopia control strategies in school health programs in countries like Nigeria, where eye exams are rare? Professor Adio, do you want to take this quickly? And then we call it a day.
Okay, school eye health is a very important aspect that an eye care professional should be involved in. And unfortunately, when you want to involve, because we're not that many, when you want to involve the teachers, they begin to ask for remuneration. That is not part of their job description. Because I find that training the teachers is a cheaper way to get things done in terms of screening. Because we can't be everywhere at once. You can kickstart, teach. The optometrist teaches the optical part, that's checking the eyes, vision and all that. Then the ophthalmologist teaches the pathological parts, simple ones. And then you give them a vision corridor, and then you equip them with tools, and then they're expected to carry on from there and refer. And then with periodic evaluation and monitoring and all that. But we find that the teachers, they are not very, apart from the fact that there's a high turnover rate, teachers may move, those you have trained, they may move to another school and all that. So these are things that there has to be policy change from the ministry. There has to be some kind of either remuneration or some kind of radical change in job description for the teachers so that they understand that this is not extra work, it's just part of what they're supposed to be doing as a teacher. But for the eye care professional, wherever you are, we have to take the gown to the town. You should not just be isolated where you're working. The schools around, you must be involved in it aside of a policy change. We find that there is no particular school eye health program anywhere, apart from the ones that NGOs are taking care of from time to time. So there has to be policy change. I'm working in my own state where I am, where I'm practicing, in Rivers State, we are working with the Primary Healthcare Board to come up with solutions in this area. But at the same time, we have to deal with the teachers, that aspects, because eye care professionals are not that many. And for it to be sustainable with the crowds of children who are in school, teachers really have to be involved. That is my take for now. We will begin to work more on this. I think it's a call to action for everyone to wherever you are practicing to be part of this. And at least before the policy change is put in place by the ministries, by the local government, by a law, there has to be something that you can do as a professional wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Professor Provin, any advice?
I think the points have been covered. We got to prioritize school eye health and we have to work in a team. But most importantly, I think that we need to make sure that we get government policy that drives school eye health, because Prof has correctly pointed out the resistance from teachers and others. And unless governments endorse this, support it, and we get policies that, for example, we have worked in some countries where now screening of children for refractive error is a compulsory requirement before you enter school. Okay, that's what we should be striving for in Africa, and making sure that we then work with governments to be able to ensure that that screening occurs, that we train teachers, we train other people, and that the referral pathways and the management of the children who need care is sorted out.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Professor Olga, Professor Kovin, Professor Adio. It's been really interesting. I mean, we could go on and we would end up sleeping here, but we'd have to call it a day today. I've left my email in the comment section. If you have more questions, please send them my way. I would divert them to each of the speakers and share their responses. The recordings for today's webinar will be available on the iAfrica Media page by tomorrow and on the YouTube page as well. Tomorrow for the webinar, click the same link. That will take you straight to the meeting. So the meeting is a recurring meeting, so use the same link. Thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you, Obi, for organizing.
Thank
It's a great
you.
pleasure.
It was a
Thank
great
you so
session.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Obi,
Bye,
Kovin, and
everyone.
Olga.
Bye.
Thank you
Good
very
night.
much.
Bye, Prof. Adieu.
Thank you, Kovin.